Okay, what's up everybody? We're back and we're gonna make a spawner today. So I'm gonna make a little bit more room here and I'm just gonna delete these walls and just make this floor a little bit bigger. Okay, so we have a little bit bigger of an area here. So we're gonna make a spawner. So this can be used for anything from spawning loot around your player to maybe even spawning enemies or anything like that. So anything that you want to spawn. So what we can do is actually make a spawner blueprint that's going to handle that. So first I'm going to make something that I can spawn in here. So I'm just in a default project here. I have no code in here. So I'm just going to make a new blueprint here and we'll make something that we can spawn in. So I'll just make an actor blueprint and I'm just going to call this BP crate maybe. Okay, then I'm going to go in there. I'm just going to add a cube to it and we'll kind of make this look more like a crate. Okay, so I got something like that. I might just throw a texture on it too, just so it looks a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead to Quixel and just go pull something. All right, so I just added this wood texture on here just to make this look a little bit better. So we're just going to pretend like this maybe is like a wood crate or something for spawning some sort of items to the player or something like that. So right now we have no code in here. Okay, and I'm actually going to delete all the starting stuff there. Now we need to get this crate to spawn, right? So we need to have something, some blueprint spawn this crate. Now, right now, all we have is the player, but we don't really want the player to spawn it. So we're going to create a new blueprint now, and we're going to make this our spawner. So I'm just going to go blueprint class actor, and I'll just call this BP underscore crate spawner. Okay, and we're going to use this blueprint to spawn our crate. So this blueprint has to be in the world. So we can put that wherever we want. And now let's go inside that blueprint. So then we don't have to add anything in our component list. We might use begin play here. If you want it to spawn right away, we can do it from begin play. So I'm just going to kind of show the basics of how to set a spawner up. You can do stuff. There's so many different ways you can tweak this and do stuff to fit what you want to do. So I'm just going to come off begin play here and I'm going to do spawn actor from class. Okay, and then I'm going to pick my BP crate and then it's going to ask for a location now. So where do we want to spawn this at? So I'm just going to say, I'm going to right click on that transform, split it. So we have access to location, rotation, all that. I'm going to drag off the location and I'm going to do get random reachable point in radius. Now I'm just going to use this as an example, but I am actually going to make my own random reachable point because I like making them and being more in control of where it's spawning from. So now if we use this, it's asking for an origin because this is going to spawn around a point from that's going to be this origin. So what we can do is just use this blueprint here. So we can just say get actor location. And the actor is going to be the spawner blueprint here. So it's going to get the location of this spawner blueprint and it's going to get a random point around there. So we can tell it what radius we want. So let's say like we'll do like 2000. And we can even give it a random rotation if we want to. So we can split that. We can take our Z and we can do a random float in range. And we can just make that range 0 to 360. So then all the crates won't be in the same rotation on the Z-axis. So if we just do that, that should spawn us one crate in a random radius around where we put that blueprint at. So let's just make sure that that's working. So we're going to jump in. Okay, so I had to add a nav mesh in here. So it kept putting my crate all the way at 0, 0 over here in this corner, which means that it wasn't getting a good location. So once I add the nav mesh to it, which I did by just going up here and going to volumes, nav mesh, and then I just stretched it out so it's covering this area. Now if I jump in here and play, it's going to give me that crate in a random spot. So then if I exit, jump back in, play. So our crate is being spawned. So that's one more reason why I'm going to make my own kind of a random location function for it. So we can actually pick like a minimum maximum value for it. But for right now, I'm just going to use that one. Okay, so we have our random spawner that's spawning this item. Now, if we wanted it to spawn more, because right now we're just spawning one crate, we can use a for loop. So if I just pull this down to get a little bit more room here, we can drag off and we can do a for loop. Now we don't want a for each loop. That's going to be for an array. So if we come down here to flow control, we have a for loop. So what a for loop does is it's very similar to a for each loop. So we give it a first index and a last index. And then based on how many indexes it has, it will fire this loop body. So whatever you have coming off this loop body will fire one time for every index you have. So for example, if we do first index at 0 and last index at, say, 4, then this loop body is going to fire 5 times for us. It's going to fire for 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this should give us 5 crates that are going to spawn now. So let's jump in and give that a shot. So if we hit play, there we go. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 crates. So every time we jump in here now and hit play, we're going to get random 5 crates spawn. So we can use this random reachable point and radius node, but I do have problems using this without a nav mesh. But one of the problems that made me want to make my own random reachable point and radius is because you don't have control over how far this thing is actually going to go. You can tell it to pick a point in a radius, but what happens sometimes, and this was happening in my game that actually made me want to make my own, is sometimes things would spawn like right next to me. So if I was trying to spawn enemies around the player, I wanted them to be like a minimum distance away, and you can't do that with this node. So we're actually going to make our own and just get rid of that. But I did just want to show that because that can be an easy way, especially if you're just trying stuff out. You can use that to get somewhat of a random reachable point here. So I'm actually going to delete that, and we're going to make our own here. So what I'm going to do is just make a function, and I'm just going to call this spawn in circle. Okay, so this will be my function that that's going to be responsible for spawning basically in a donut shape. So we're going to have a minimum and a maximum value that we can set, and then it's just going to spawn around the player in that range that we give it. So what we're going to do is get player character, okay, because we want to spawn this around the player. We want to keep it close to the player. So we're going to get actor location, and then we're going to need to get actor forward vector. And then we're going to come off the forward vector and we're going to look for a rotate vector. And what we're going to do is split this rotation here. And then we're going to grab the Z and we're going to do a random float in range. And this random float's going to be 0 to 360. So what this is doing so far is it's getting the player forward vector, and then we're getting a random yaw value from that. And that's going to output basically just the Z here. So we still have to get our distance. So we're going to actually come off this, do a multiply, and then we're going to split what we're multiplying here. And we need 2 more random floats in range. So I'm just going to grab this and we're just going to paste in 2 more down here. And one's going to go to X and one's going to go to Y. And then we're going to make 2 variables. So all I'm going to do is just right click on this max here, promote to variable, and right click on min and promote to variable. Now we're going to connect these up to both of these. So min is going to go to both mins and max is going to go to both maxes. And we can rename that like spawn range or whatever. I'm just going to leave that at min and max. And then what I like doing is let's compile so we have access to this. So we can give these default values here. And also what I want to do is just make it instance editable and exposed on spawn for both min and max. And I'll show why we do that in a second here. So we have our variables now. So that's going to be our minimum distance spawning away from the player and our maximum distance. And then this is going to give us that random direction to go to. All right, so now we're going to come off our actor location and we're going to add. And we're going to plug this, the product of our multiply is going to go into our add. And then we're going to split this pin here. So this is going to give us an individual X, Y, and Z here. So now if I find my spawn and circle here, we're going to do a line trace by channel. And I'm going to split the start and I'm going to split the end. And I'm going to run the X to the start X and the end X. And the same thing with the Y, start Y and end Y. And then we're not going to pass anything in for the Z because that's what our line trace is going to do. So what this is doing up to this point is giving us that random point. We just don't know what height it's going to be at yet. So this is picking a random direction from the player's forward vector on that Z. And then on that Z, we're adding a minimum and maximum distance for it to pick from. And that's going to be coming in here. So then all we have to do is just get that Z value, which is going to be the height. So if we were standing on a hill or something and something was to spawn around us, it's not going to spawn in the air. This line trace is going to come down. It's going to know what point that we already picked. It's going to know the direction and how far out it is. So it just doesn't know the height that it's going to spawn at yet. So that's what this is going to do. We're going to have it fire a line trace straight down. And I'm just going to pick something. I'm on flat ground now. You would essentially want to just make this like the highest point in your map to the lowest point in your map. So it doesn't really matter for this scenario, but I'm just going to do 2000 to minus 2000 just for an example here. And then I'm going to break this out hit result here, and we're going to look for the impact point. And then I'm also going to just throw a return on here. And then I'm going to drag the impact point to the return. And then we can close that up. And we're set now. So this function is set. And then what I like doing is just coming in here and cleaning this up. I'm going to leave those two variables out, and I'm just going to collapse that down. This is our custom random reachable point in radius node here. And then we can say we want a minimum of, let's say, 1,000 from the player, and then a maximum of, say, 2,000. So let's try this and see how this works. And as long as our trace is hitting, we should get a good spawn point here. So I'm actually going to put for duration on so we can see our trace channel coming down. We have our min set, we have our max set, and we have our impact point returning out of this function now. So now if we compile, save that, we go to our event graph. Now it's asking for a location. So we can drag in our spawn and circle function here, and we can run that on the loop and then go into our spawn actor and just give our impact point to our location. So now every time this loop body fires, it's going to get a random point in a circle for us, like in a donut basically, and that's where we're going to spawn this actor from here. So let's check that out and see how that works. And we have our debug on, so we should be able to see our lines coming down. And there we go. So these crates now won't spawn any closer than 1,000 to us. Okay, so they have to spawn within 1,000 and 2,000. Now we made them instance editable and exposed on spawn because now we can click our blueprint, we can click our spawner blueprint, and you can see right here, we have those values now, min and max. So if I wanted to push that out, I can say I want 2,000 for a min and 4,000 for a max. And then if we jump in, you can see how they're now all pushed out. And we could shut our debug off now if we wanted to. So this gives us a nice way to control spawning things around the player. So if this was an enemy or something like that and you wanted a minimum distance from it, this is a much better solution than using the get random reachable point in radius. I don't know how big my landscape is here, but we could say minimum 5,000, max 6,000. So now they're pushed out even further. And you're in control of that min and max, which is really nice. I'm going to exaggerate this, but let's say again that this is loot boxes that we're spawning in here. Maybe they're going to expire and despawn after so much time. So we can do a set lifespan. And I'm going to run the return value into the target, and now it's going to ask me how long. So I'm just going to set these for 5 seconds. So these will spawn and then disappear in 5 seconds. Okay, so let's just jump in, verify that that's working. So now in 5 seconds, these crates should disappear, and they do. So all of our crates are gone. So now what we can do is we can take this another step further. Instead of putting it on begin play, let's make a custom event, and we'll say spawn crates, and we'll plug that into our for loop here. And now we're going to call that spawn crates up here. So because we just made an event, it's right here. We can also drag out and start typing spawn crates, and you'll find it there, but it's actually easier just right here. All of your events will always be under event graph here. So you can just grab spawn crates, drag it out, and now begin play will call this. So now on begin play, we can call our spawn crate. One other thing we can do is we can drag off begin play and do a set timer by function name. And now if we get our spawn crates that we made, we can just copy that name to make sure we get it exact. We can paste that name in here, and we can tell it how long after this gets called will this call our spawn crates. So let's say we want 5 seconds. And again, you could set this for a random time if you want to. You could do a random float and range and do whatever you want. But just for the purpose of this, we're just going to have we'll do a 3-second delay on there. So we should have a 3-second delay. Then it's going to call this. It's going to spawn 5 crates. And then in 5 seconds, they're going to disappear. So now if we jump in, there's a blueprint here. So we'll just wait our 3 seconds, and there they are. So we got our delay. And then 5 seconds, they're gone. Now, we're setting the lifespan for 5 seconds here, so we could also recall this too. So if we wanted to spawn stuff around the player and then have it despawn and then have it respawn, we can control that from here too. And then what we can do is come off the completed pin here. We can actually just copy that set timer right there, and we can, on completed, we can have a new time that will fire this again. So let's say that our crates despawn in 5 seconds, and maybe we want 5 seconds where there's no crates. Again, this is exaggerated. You might want this to be, 10 minutes in your game or whatever fits, right? But what I'm going to say is we'll do 10 seconds here. So we're going to spawn our crates, and then in 5 seconds, they're going to disappear, and then we won't have any crates for 5 seconds. We're going to come out here and fire this once, which is going to refire this in 10 seconds here. I'm just going to jump in. We're going to check this out. So we should have a delay before they come in, and there's our crates. Okay, and then they should despawn here, and now they respawn. And then they're going to despawn again, and then they're going to respawn. Let's say we were to look at this size map of the spawner we made. Where is it? Crate spawner. So if we check the size map on that, you can see it's 17 megabytes. Now that's not much because I downloaded 2K textures, kind of compressed them a little bit, which is usually what I do. So this isn't a huge blueprint here. But maybe if the item you're spawning is big, and maybe if it's not going to be in your world all the time, then having this spawner blueprint in your world is going to keep it loaded. Because the second we put this spawn actor node in here, we're making a hard reference to this crate or to whatever we're spawning, right? We're making a hard reference to that in this spawner blueprint. So whenever this spawner blueprint's in our world, we have a hard reference to that crate in here. So just having this blueprint in our world is the same thing as having a crate that's always in here. So maybe if this is something that's not always going to be in your world, maybe this is something that's only going to spawn once in a while, and you don't want to have the memory of it being held, we can async load that. So what we can actually do here is change this a little bit to make it a little bit more efficient. So let's come in here and we'll make a new variable, and we'll call this our crate. And then what I want to do is make it a actor. And I'm going to pick a soft class reference of the type actor. Okay, then if I compile and save that, if we select our crate, we can come over here and you can see that we have a default value and it's set to none. I can tell it that I want that to be my BP crate. So when we do the spawn crates here, this is when we're going to load it. So when we fire the spawn crates is when we're going to load this soft class reference into memory. So if we pull this crate variable out that we made, we can drag off and do async load class asset. So at this point, this will be loading the crate into memory. So then we can come off completed. And what we want to do is plug this crate into our class here. And it just put this behind everything. So we'll kind of do this, straighten it up, clean it up a little bit. Okay, so with that cleaned up a little bit, what we're doing is we have our variable. This is our soft class reference to our crate. And we're telling it at this point, we want to load it. So it's going to get loaded into memory here so that it can get spawned. So we're coming off the completed pin. So once this gets loaded into memory, we don't have to load it for each time, which is why we're not going to put it after our loop. We just want to come down, load this into memory, and then we're going to loop and spawn 5 of them. And if we compile and save that, if we jump into the crate spawner and we look at the size map, now you can see we're down to 500 kilobytes. So we're no longer holding a hard reference to that crate in this blueprint here. Okay, so this blueprint, it can just be in our game. It can be hanging out, and that blueprint is now only 500 kilobytes. So it's not taking up anything until we call it. So if we do that now, we shouldn't see any delay or anything. They should just spawn in 1 second, just like they did. So again, this is just kind of the basics of how to handle and set up a spawner. It's pretty customizable too. So if you wanted to, you could actually tweak this easy too. If you wanted to be in control of how many items spawned more easily, we can promote that to a variable there, get our last index, make that instance editable, expose that on spawn, and then we can just select that from here now. So now as long as our blueprint is selected right here, we now have our last index. So if we wanted 10 crates to spawn, we can change that right from here. And now we have 10 crates spawning around the player. And they're all going to despawn, but we could set that despawn time as a variable too. So if we wanted to be able to control that, we can promote that, have our lifespan, instance editable, exposed on spawn. We can give all these default values if we want, but now we have our lifespan. So now if we wanted that to be 10 seconds, and let's say we want 20 crates, we now have that ability to tweak this blueprint on the fly. I think that's going to be it for now. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.